Chapter 1. The Day the Garden Got Religion. The sun crawled over the east ridge like it had a hangover, smearing a weak orange glow over Yancy and Swanson's farm. The place wasn't much, 20 acres of stubborn land, a barn that leaned like a hunchback after a bad chiropractic adjustment, and a garden so overworked it ought to have been collecting alimony. Yancy tromped out first, boots unlaced, hair sticking up like he'd spent the night wrestling a malfunctioning leaf blower. Swanson followed, coffee mug in hand, already wearing the expression of a man who expected the universe to do something stupid before breakfast. Usually he was right. "Smells like hot dog water," Swanson said, sniffing the air. "Like cheap fairground hot dog water. The kind somebody pissed Jupiter into." "That was one time," Yancy muttered, kicking the dirt. And it was dark. They approached the garden gate, which creaked open like an elderly gossip with fresh dirt to spill. Everything seemed normal at first glance: tomatoes, kale, quinoa that Yancy insisted on growing even though he hated quinoa, and the rows of ornamental pumpkins they planted every year to look festive and hide the fact that they couldn't grow a decent zucchini to save their lives. But then Swanson froze. "What in the sanctuary of pig lungs is that?" They both leaned in. Peeking out from the soil were not sprouts, not leaves, but something disturbingly humanoid. 3 inches tall, skin glistening like a slug rolled in Vaseline. Their tiny arms folded over their tiny chests. Their faces serene, beatific, wholly even. Like gods. Miniature, naked, smug-looking gods. "Yancy," Swanson whispered, "our vegetables have developed a theology." Yancy reached forward, hesitated, then nudged one gently with a hoe. The little creature opened one eye, just one, like a toddler waking from a nap, and let out a tiny, irritated sigh. "You've got to be kidding me," Yancy said. Before either of them could decide whether to scream, run, or build a shrine, Sam stepped out from behind the shed. Sam moved silently despite their military boots, the kind of quiet that you only learn after years as a Marine and a lifetime of being no one's neat little box on a census form. Sam squinted at the garden. "Those ain't seedlings." "No," Swanson said, voice wobbling. "They're divine." Sam gave a slow nod. "Great. God's in a garden. I ask for one peaceful morning, and instead I get a spiritual infestation." One of the tiny gods raised its hand like it was politely asking permission to curse them. Another sneezed, spraying something that landed on Yancy's jeans with a wet smack, a viscous, shimmering blob the exact color of melted carnival cheese. Yancy stared at the splatter. "I think it's judging me." "I would too," Sam said. And then something moved at the far end of the garden, something bigger. The pumpkins. The entire row shifted, shivering like a line of plump orange soldiers preparing to stand at attention. Their vines twitched. Their rinds bulged. And that same hot dog water smell rolled over the field again, stronger this time, like someone somewhere had boiled an entire concession stand alive. Swanson grabbed Yancy's arm. "Yancy, the pumpkins are breathing." Sam reached for the knife at their belt. The largest pumpkin swelled once, twice, then split down the middle with a wet crack. Inside, something moved. And then the ground beneath their feet trembled. Something was coming up from under the pumpkins. Something wet. Something steaming. Something that smelled unmistakably like hot dog water. And then the soil burst open with a roar. Chapter 2. the day everybody grew a tail. 3 days after the garden sprouted gods and the pumpkins started huffing out steam like overworked boiler pipes, the first tails appeared. Not metaphorical ones, not poetic ones, honest to misery, flesh and bone appendages sprouting right above everyone's, but crack like unwelcome party guests. Yancy's tail was thin and twitchy, like it had independent opinions about everything. Swanson's was thick and blunt, shaped exactly like a regrettable sweet potato. Sam, naturally, didn't get a tail at first. Sam just grew an intense, vibrating itch in the small of their back, the kind you earn in basic training when someone throws scabies-infested wool blankets into your bunk as a joke. By noon, half the village was walking around trying to hide their new accessories under flannel shirts or, in the case of local schoolteacher Meryl Hennington, under a Carol Burnett Show commemorative poncho she insisted was purely decorative. Blame was floating around town like pollen. Some said it was pinworms gone feral. Others blamed ringworm, snake oil, or the pumpkin's hot dog water fumes. A small evangelical sect blamed palm trees because apparently anything tropical was suspicious. But the real trouble didn't start until Yancy's second cousin Lonnie arrived. Lonnie smelled like a laundry hamper left on the porch during monsoon season. He rolled up to the farm wearing Velcro sneakers, yellow mesh shorts, and a t-shirt featuring a faded picture of George Jones looking like he wished he hadn't lived long enough to appear on Lonnie's torso. Lonnie didn't bother knocking. Lonnie never did. He barged in, dropped a duffel bag, and said, "I need a place to stay. I've been through something. Yancy and Swanson exchanged the sort of look reserved for scorpions, religious abuse flashbacks, and the announcement of a country festival headlined by someone who shouldn't still be touring. Sam stepped forward. "What exactly have you been through?" Lonnie swallowed hard. "A woman. Or maybe a spirit. Or maybe both. She said we was soulmates. Heart soulmate. Twin flame. Then she stole my truck, my insulin, and my underwear." Yancy winced. "Lonnie, did you file a report?" Lonnie shrugged and dug in his duffel bag. The smell that escaped could have ended 3 pandemics and started 7 new ones. Out he pulled a pair of panties, pale yellow, shredded elastic, with clearish white discharge stains like some kind of forensic crime scene no detective wanted to investigate. "These ain't mine," Lonnie said proudly. "I found Em in my motel bed. Means she's coming back." Sam rubbed the bridge of their nose. "What it means is you need a fire pit and a hazmat crew." Lonnie ignored that. Then he lifted his shirt. The tail was there. Thick. Hairy. Curled at the end like a demonic question mark. Yancy stepped back. "Lonnie, when did that show up?" "Last night," Lonnie whispered. "I thought it was progeria or scleroderma or that wasting disease folks on the news keep hollerin' about." He leaned in and whispered, "Do I got AIDS? I knew a guy once who had something and his skin got yellow like a school bus." Sam kept their voice steady. "No diagnosis until we get you to a doctor. And undetectable means untransmittable, but that's a whole conversation you aren't emotionally ready for." Lonnie nodded like he understood exactly none of that. Meanwhile, out in the fields, villagers were gathering. Tails flicking. Some long and cat-like. Some short and twitchy. One man had a tail shaped suspiciously like a pig's corkscrew, which he insisted meant he was chosen by the divine, though everyone knew he was the type to think a hangover was a message from God. The global news networks were losing their minds. Reports came in from Madrid, then Texas, then Tokyo. A bizarre syndrome spreading worldwide. Tails, itching, fever, a hunger for canned peaches. Nobody knew the cause. Nobody knew the cure. Conspiracy theorists blamed Sam specifically because ex-Marines know things. Scientists blamed climate change. The local church blamed quinoa salad. By sundown, Yancy was exhausted, Swanson was irritated, Sam was sharpening knives to quiet their brain, and Lonnie was busy making friendship bracelets for everyone because he decided the pandemic meant they should all heal their trauma bonds. Then the village doctor arrived. He was sweating, pale, twitchy, and wearing nothing but boxers and a bathrobe because his tail had torn straight through his pants that morning when he sneezed. He pushed his glasses up. "Good news," he announced. "Nobody's dying." Everyone exhaled. But, the doctor added, this tail sickness spreads through emotional stress, environmental triggers, and possibly extremely poor decision-making. He eyed Lonnie. "Especially poor decision-making." Lonnie waved. The doctor continued, "There is a simple treatment." Everyone leaned forward, desperate. "You need to remain calm," he said. "Relax. Don't panic. Keep a peaceful, steady heart." Just then, a goat trotted past wearing a tutu. Lonnie screamed. Everyone's tails shot straight up like synchronized furry fireworks. The doctor sighed. "Well," he muttered, "there goes that." Then the goat farted so loudly it echoed off the barn. And for reasons nobody could explain, every tail in the entire village wagged. Chapter 3. The Gods Go to the County Festival. The county festival arrived like a migraine in denim. Every villager for 50 miles poured into the fairgrounds wearing their finest tail-accommodating outfits. Some slit the backs of their jeans. Some let their new appendages wag free like confused metronomes. One woman crocheted a tail cozy with the lyrics to a George Jones song woven into the yarn. Tradition, after all, had to evolve. Yancy stood backstage, clutching his guitar like it was the last sane thing in a world gone sideways. The Christian acoustic set had been Swanson's idea. "If the world's growing tails and plants are sprouting gods," he'd said, "a hymn or two won't kill anybody." Except now the stage lights blasted him with the kind of scrutiny that could trigger self-dissociation in even the boldest sinner. Sam sat nearby, rolling maracas absently between their palms like a Marine trying to decide whether to join a drum circle or burn it down. Then it was time. Yancy walked out. The crowd quieted. The local pastor gave him a nod of approval that felt heavy enough to yank Yancy's soul out by the collar. He sat on the stool, adjusted his mic, and began strumming. The sound drifted soft and sincere across the fairgrounds, over the generator fumes, over the funnel cake grease, over the children with afros bouncing rhythmically as their tails wagged in time. Halfway through his third song, "I Am the Lamb, Please Ignore My Tail," the audience got weirdly emotional. Some cried. Some swayed. One man fainted directly into a vat of chili and didn't resurface for a full 8 seconds. Yancy's voice cracked at just the right moment, that sort of holy crack that record labels dream of and therapists worry about. When the final chord faded, the crowd erupted. Swanson looked at Sam. Sam looked at Swanson. "Well," Sam muttered, "he's definitely getting scouted." And right on cue, a record executive in sunglasses and a shirt so loud it counted as a hate crime approached Yancy. "We need to talk," he said. "You ever consider a contract? Acoustic Christian tail-themed revival music is the next big thing." Yancy's knees nearly liquefied. Meanwhile, at the far end of the festival, everyone else was losing their collective minds because the gods had started sprouting en masse again. The change had escalated. Now the vegetable leaves were curling inward like shy hands, revealing tiny faces on every kale stalk, carrot top, eggplant stem. Huge, expressive eyes. Little button noses. The kind of mouths that could either bless you or spit in your lemonade depending on mood. Their little heads quivered like they wanted to whisper gossip. Swanson saw opportunity. He and Sam dragged in folding tables, crates, and a big wooden sign painted in neon letters. Choose your own god. Take one home today. Reasonable prices, no refunds. The gods, rooted, wriggling, occasionally pouting, were displayed like a questionable farmer's market from a fevered dream. Villagers lined up instantly. Some clutched the tiny holy sprouts to their chests with elation. Others recoiled in repulsion. One woman burst into tears and fled screaming because her god winked and whispered, "Howdy." A man lifted a turnip god whose face looked unmistakably like Mama Harper from Mama's Family. Someone else held a zucchini with the serene expression of Michael Landon from Little House on the Prairie. And tucked behind a display crate sat something nobody wanted to acknowledge, a small bundle of purple fabric that looked an awful lot like Hannah Montana's soiled garment from a thrift store bin of cursed memorabilia. "This is the strangest booth we've ever run," Swanson said. "Second strangest," Sam replied. "Remember the snake oil tent we accidentally hosted last year when we rented to that guy with the emotional support ferret?" The festival roared on. Afros bounced. Maracas shook. Tails everywhere wagged or drooped depending on purchase satisfaction. A local teenager tried to trade his god for a corn dog. Then came the psychic message. Sam froze mid-step. Their pupils expanded like someone had dropped a spotlight into their skull. "You hear that?" they whispered. Swanson blinked. "Hear what?" A voice. No voices. A whole damn committee. Sam sank onto a hay bale as images blitzed their mind. Africa, a small grass hut in the middle of nowhere, sunlight pouring through slatted walls. Then a parade of giraffes marching through South Africa like they were late to a board meeting. Then a cluster of elders gathered around a fire, sending out psychic transmissions with the seriousness of an IRS audit. The message hit Sam like a thunderclap. "The gods you sell are ours. They migrated. Return them before they awaken." Sam snapped back to reality. Swanson stared. "You spaced out there. Looked like you were watching a documentary about giraffes unionizing." Sam wiped sweat from their forehead. "We have a problem." Before they could explain, Yancy returned from the stage, dazed, waving a contract like it might bite him. "Swanson. Sam. They want to sign me. They want a whole album. They want." Then he froze. Because behind the booth, the gods were stirring. Every tiny face turned upward. Every little vegetable head hummed. Every leaf shook like a warning tremor. And then, as the sun dipped behind the treeline, the gods began chanting in unison, a soft, eerie murmur, like dozens of toddlers saying grace in Latin. The villagers panicked. Sam panicked. Swanson panicked. Yancy stared at his contract and whispered, "Is this bad timing?" One of the kale gods spat at him. Then, blessedly, mercifully, tragically, a drunk man in a George Strait t-shirt tripped over a speaker cord, collapsed backward into a kiddie pool, and sent a tidal wave of lukewarm lemonade directly into the chanting gods. They sputtered. They squeaked. They screamed in tiny outrage. Then every one of them went silent and pouting. The villagers gasped. The gods glared. Then the tiniest god muttered, in a shrill, angry whisper. "Rude." It was the funniest thing anyone had heard all year. 3 people fainted laughing. 1 woman peed. Swanson dropped his corn dog. And the chapter's chaos ended not with doom, not with prophecy, but with a chorus of tiny angry gods grumbling like irritated Smurfs who'd just been splashed at a water park. Chapter 4, the festival that lasted too long and made everyone reconsider reality. Twice the length, twice the madness, twice the connective tissue. Morning came to the village like a tired drunk lowering himself into a folding chair, slow, creaky, and already apologizing for whatever chaos it planned to cause. People were waking up groggy, confused, and noticeably shorter. The tail epidemic had taken an unexpected turn overnight. Some villagers discovered their tails elongating like licorice ropes. Others found theirs shrinking and retracting, which would have been comforting if their bodies weren't also shrinking an inch or 2 at a time. Children woke up taller than their parents. Husbands woke up unable to reach their razors. One man swore the supernatural pestilence had turned him 3 inches shorter, but 2 shades more handsome. No one agreed on whether the pestilence was helpful, harmful, or some kind of mystical self-exfoliation of the human race. But everyone agreed it was disturbing in a way that aloe vera couldn't soothe. Even aloe vera itself had started acting strange, plants oozing on their own, secreting goo that glowed at night, whispering in Yiddish if you leaned too close. And yes, Yiddish, because that morning the village gained a new arrival. His name was Ephraim Gottlieb, a sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued Jewish mystic from Brooklyn who somehow found himself wandering the county festival grounds before anyone had officially opened the gates. Ephraim wore a black hat slightly askew, a vest decorated with embroidered pomegranates, and held a small leather-bound prayer book tucked under his arm like he expected the gods or the pumpkins or the tails to do something that violated rabbinical law at any moment. He walked straight up to Sam. "You," he said, pointing, "have the look of someone who's gotten 3 psychic messages too many." Sam blinked. "Do I know you?" "Not yet. But the universe keeps sending me to people with unfortunate destinies. I can smell it on you. Also, the aloe vera in your pocket is muttering about you behind your back." Sam pulled out the aloe vera leaf they'd harvested earlier. It hissed at them. Sam quietly put it away. Meanwhile, Yancy, now contract official and terrified, sat on a hay bale reading the fine print of his record deal as though it were an ancient curse tablet. Swanson paced beside him, muttering about liability insurance for selling gods at a country festival. "Look," Yancy said, "I know this is a dream come true, but what about the gods? And the shrinking? And the giraffe parade that spoke telepathically? And Lonnie moving into our guest room without permission?" "You're asking the wrong questions," Swanson replied. "The right question is, can we still sell these gods at the festival without getting sued?" Before Yancy could respond, Sam whistled sharply. "Everybody gather." The villagers drifted over, some shorter, some taller, some still adjusting to accidentally twerking whenever their tails twitched. On the festival table, the gods stirred. Their faces seemed sharper now, more expressive, more aware. Some looked annoyed. Some looked hungry. A few looked like they were trying to seduce a maraca vendor. Sam cleared their throat. "There's news," they said. "We're dealing with something bigger than we thought. Last night, I got another psychic communique from those elders in South Africa." Everyone leaned in, breathless. "They say the gods that are growing in our gardens aren't just plants. They're entities that have migrated across continents. Across realities, even. They came through spiritual fault lines created by trauma, religious abuse, unresolved grief, and, bizarrely, a trail of Reba McEntire-themed lesbian fanfiction that someone has been uploading to the cloud at 3 in the morning. Every villager slowly turned to look at Olivia, the woman who ran the diner. Olivia shrugged. What? Reba has range. Before Sam could continue, Ephraim stepped forward. Let me explain, he said, in more mystical terms. He set down his prayer book, reached into his satchel, and produced something no one expected. A treasure chest. Not ornate, not pirate-like, more like something you'd store mismatched socks in. But when he opened it, well, inside were mutilated human heads, not fresh, not bleeding, but petrified, fossilized, ancient. Their mouths warped as though caught mid-scream. Their eyes frozen wide, each one with strange branching roots growing out of the necks. Yancy gagged. Swanson gagged twice. Lonnie fainted into a pile of funnel cake batter. These, Ephraim said calmly, are warnings. Artifacts. They come from a plane of existence where harvesting gods didn't go so well. Sam crossed their arms. You could have led with that. Ephraim snapped the chest closed. I didn't want to alarm you. You brought a headbox to a family festival, Swanson said. Consider us alarmed. Meanwhile, the gods were getting restless. Their leafy tendrils curled. Their tiny mouths mouthed unheard words. Their eyes glimmered. The smallest god, nicknamed Dope Rope by Lonnie for reasons no one understood, began vibrating so hard it rattled the table. The pestilence surged. People shrank another half-inch. Tails sparked static electricity. Sam felt a psychic itch behind their forehead. And then, of all things, a cloud of airplane plants drifted overhead, floating like jellyfish, shaking pollen like confetti. A few villagers screamed. A few villagers tried to catch one. One man asked if this counted as a sign to finally get breast surgery, because he'd been thinking about it and the universe seemed open to surprises. Chaos brimmed. Elation mixed with dread. Repulsion tangled with weird, giddy excitement. And then, right in the middle of it all, a familiar argument echoed from behind the lemonade booth. My sister and your mama, someone shouted, wouldn't have put up with this. Oh, don't you start. My mama would have used one of them gods as a kitchen timer and not blinked once. A brawl nearly broke out between families, prevented only by a god shrieking loudly enough to rupture 2 eardrums and scare everyone into politeness. Then, the strangest moment of the day unfolded. A driftwood sculpture of an airplane entered into the best craft competition, suddenly grew wings and took flight. It swooped low over the crowd like a confused gull and dropped a handful of pumpkin seeds onto Ephraim's head. He sighed. Yes, this tracks. But the biggest shock hadn't arrived yet. Because the gods weren't done. Every vegetable god on the table sat up at the same time, their leafy bodies straightening like angry toddlers involved in a union meeting. Then they pointed tiny, gnarled fingers all aimed in the same direction. Up. Everyone followed their gaze. Above the tree line, above the festival lights, above the driftwood airplane making lazy loops in the sky. A shimmering rift appeared. Like a tear in the world. From the rift emerged 3 more gods, massive, glowing, beautiful, horrifying, each shaped like a vegetable deity carved by an artist who'd been awake for 40 hours and lost a bet. They descended slowly, their voices vibrating through the air. You sold US for $15 each. The villagers froze. Sam swallowed. Swanson whispered, was it supposed to be 30? Yancy, overwhelmed, trembling, gripping his guitar contract like a lifeline, spoke aloud. Can this wait until after my album drops? One of the giant gods squinted. Then, in a deadpan voice. No. And from somewhere in the crowd, someone yelled. Whoever threw that god, your mama's a hoe. Every tail in the village twitched in unison. 3 kids started giggling. One god face-palmed. And Ephraim, wise, ancient, weary Ephraim, muttered. Welcome to the apocalypse. New, at least it's entertaining. The chapter ends mid-festival, mid-freakout, with the villagers staring at 3 giant gods who look ready to file complaints. And Lonnie waking up from his funnel cake fainting spell, looking around in confusion and slurring. Did I miss the triple penetration cooking demo or what? And somehow, that was the least disturbing thing anyone heard all day. The village had begun to feel like a cracked snow globe someone kept shaking too hard. Every surface glittered with the uncanny, the inconvenient, and the downright questionable. People's tails, yes, the tails, were shrinking now, deflating like leftover party balloons. They still swished when startled, which made grocery shopping a noisy affair. Yancy woke with the soft itch of existential dread and the sharper itch of aloe vera gel drying on his shoulders. Swanson snored beside him like a clogged accordion. Sam, somewhere in the barn, sat cross-legged under the rafters doing whatever ex-Marines did when a mystical pestilence washed over the world. Their version of centering oneself mostly involved muttering, seen worse in basic training, and at least this isn't Velcro sneaker weather. The farm felt crowded today. Maybe it was the gods. They had doubled in number overnight. Where yesterday the vegetables merely sprouted faces, today they had expressions. Too many expressions. One beet grinned like a dentist who knew your insurance had lapsed. A cabbage frowned with judgmental mother-in-law intensity. A carrot rolled its tiny eyes. And on the southern acreage, a new problem bubbled up, a pestilence. Not the classic kind, the world had already survived enough biological fiascos. This one shimmered. It drifted. It hummed as if broadcast from a celestial kazoo. Folks exposed to it became heightened versions of themselves. A cranky baker became furiously cranky, whipping bread dough like it owed him money. A shy teenager became shy enough to vanish behind a wall of self-dissociation, so powerful she probably existed on 3 astral planes at once. Into this circus walked Shlomo Eisen, the new arrival. Nobody knew how he'd gotten to the farm. Nobody knew why he was completely unbothered by the pestilence. He wore a lavender windbreaker, carried a dope rope slung over one shoulder like a decorative serpent, and seemed utterly unfazed by the treasure chest sitting in the yard. Yes, the chest. The very one Yancy had tripped over at dawn. The chest that, once pried open, revealed not gold but mutilated human heads. They were serene, smiling even, eyes closed. Glowing faint blue. Sam stared, shrugged, and said, seen weirder in a driftwood airplane crash. Shlomo simply said, well, that's Sunday for you. The village reeled from everything at once, the gods, the disappearing tails, the chest full of heads, the pestilence turning people into exaggerated versions of themselves. A pair of local lesbians announced they'd taken up cooking experimental fusion cuisine to cope. Reba McEntire lesbians, Yancy whispered, because the pair played her music nonstop and wore matching auburn wigs. Meanwhile, in town, trouble brewed. One man, Doug Hepsworth, began sprouting strange fruits from his shoulders. Not tumors or boils, but actual fruits, each etched with tiny symbols. No two alike. One looked suspiciously like the Hebrew letter Shin. Another resembled a cartoon chicken doing tap dance. Naturally, the village's response was, "Neat. Let's pick them." Doug was less enthusiastic and began wearing a trench coat year-round. Trouble didn't stop there. Swanson nearly got arrested after lunging at Alma Greaves, the woman who once had an affair with Swanson's former partner back in the hazier chapters of life best left unremembered. Swanson didn't actually try to kill her, but the choking scene was memorable. They were arguing in the bakery when a loaf of sourdough launched itself from the mystical pestilence's energy current and clocked Alma in the neck. She staggered back, gasping dramatically, while Swanson stood frozen holding a baguette like evidence from a crime scene. The baker called the sheriff. The sheriff called it a misunderstanding with gluten. Then the cars collided. At the town's three-way intersection, three vehicles managed through bad timing, cosmic mischief, or divine slapstick to hit each other at the exact same instant. The resulting crunch morphed into a single metallic blob shaped like something between a pentagram and the ancient Egyptian symbol for sky. It hummed. It vibrated. It smelled faintly of gravy-train dog food and burning cassette tapes of Time After Time. A local Reba fanatic, freshly escaped from prison after allegedly attacking the singer during a meet-and-greet years ago, wandered up to the wreckage, slapped it, and declared, "This here is a sign from the Virgin Mary." Nobody contradicted them. Not because they were right, but because they carried maracas and a wild look in their eyes. Back on the farm, Yancy, Swanson, Sam, and Shlomo gathered under the porch light. Gods shifted in the fields, glowing faces bobbing like lanterns. The pestilence hummed like a cosmic refrigerator. Doug's fruit symbols glowed under his trench coat. Somewhere far off, a tap-dancing chicken fell over. "Is this the apocalypse?" Yancy asked. Sam rubbed their temples. "If it is, it's got a terrible choreographer." Then the smallest god, barely bigger than a kiwi, popped out of the soil and announced in a squeaky voice, "I made chili." And, just like that, the chapter ended with everybody screaming, because gods shouldn't know how to cook, and certainly shouldn't announce it like a PTA mom proud of her potluck contribution. The smell, incidentally, was excellent, but nobody dared try it. The world, somehow, had gotten weirder. Chapter 7. The Second Voice and the Hill of Gratitude. The air around the farm had grown thick, like the whole valley had been dipped in warm candle wax. Every leaf in every field now hummed softly, as if the roots of the world were whispering to themselves. And just when the villagers thought they'd seen every strange permutation of the gods bursting from the soil phenomenon, the farm's old dairy goat, Himshine, began speaking. Not in Spanish. Not in French. Not even in the clacking, vowel-heavy tongue of the root gods. These words came from someplace beyond maps or alphabets. Sometimes it sounded like a flute melting. Sometimes it sounded like a library burning in reverse, shrieking its knowledge back onto the shelves. And then, at random intervals, she'd switch to perfect Italian and ask someone to pass the salt. Marcus claimed Himshine wasn't speaking to them, she was speaking for them. The universe's interpreter goat. A translator for the mystical pestilence rippling across the earth, a pestilence that, oddly enough, made crops sweeter, hair shinier, and bad memories drift away like dandelion fluff. Disturbing, but not exactly villainous. The town's new prophet explained this better than anyone. That prophet was 6 years old, adopted just 10 days earlier by Tessa Harrow. He'd arrived small, shy, with eyes like turning galaxies. And after a night spent near a circle of newly sprouted dirt gods, a second head fully formed had blossomed from his right shoulder. They named the new head Eli. The original head remained Jacob. Together, Jacob-Eli spoke in stereo. They became the human version of a cosmic duet. When they walked through town, wings began sprouting on the backs of grown men and women like the feathers had been waiting for that exact moment, that exact child, that exact miracle. At the center of town, by the tiny stone amphitheater where the villagers usually held square dances and bake-offs, a girl stood on a grassy hill. She looked maybe 12. She faced the sky with her arms open and shouted every single thing she was grateful for. Her voice cracked, but she kept going, as if gratitude itself were the new currency of survival. I'm grateful for my mama, for my dog Pepper, for the rain, for Jacob-Eli, for the wings, for the goat who can talk like boiling stars. The villagers applauded, lighting tea-light candles in little rings at her feet, some for hope, some for remembrance, some for the hell of it. Tessa kept a gratitude journal now, scribbling furiously every few hours, trying to make sense of her boy's double-headed destiny. Jacob was soft-spoken and tender. Eli was blunt, hilarious, and occasionally insulting in an oddly wise way. Together they balanced each other like twin prophets who'd studied the book of Proverbs but disagreed on the footnotes. Answer not a fool according to his folly, Jacob would say gently. But sometimes you gotta, Eli would mutter. Meanwhile, the supernatural pestilence deepened. People woke up to find their shadows lagged 5 seconds behind them. Cats floated slightly. And several townsfolk discovered their tails, small, flexible, and mildly offended, were shrinking day by day for reasons no one could pinpoint. Still, life moved. And with life came cigarettes. A pack of Marlboro Light 100s rested in the pocket of Vernon Pike, who leaned on the fence watching him shine recite some unknown cosmic recipe in her shimmering, impossible language. Vernon wasn't a smoker anymore. He claimed the gods cured him, but he kept the pack as a strange talisman, proof the old world had once been simple. Vernon, who had grown up in a church where fear passed for faith, sometimes muttered that this pestilence felt like redemption disguised as mischief. Trauma bonds, he said, might be breaking. Religious abuse might be dissolving like old wallpaper. The universe was rewriting itself. And the characters who had been living small, scared lives were suddenly becoming cosmic versions of themselves. Which is when Jacob-Eli began speaking in unison. Two of the old controversies return. Not the events, only the lessons. Everyone froze. Jacob continued softly, the storm when truth was questioned. Eli added sharply, and the one when the world argued about art and morality. People murmured. They remembered how pop culture sometimes shook the world the way small gods now shook the soil. Madonna's old scandals became metaphors in Jacob-Eli's mouths, symbols of how provocation and transformation often shared the same doorway. The villagers didn't debate the details, they simply listened, letting the metaphor breathe. And yet, for all these cosmic revelations, fate still had a twisted sense of humor. Because that was the day little Himshine, the goat oracle herself, shuffled up behind Vernon Pike, tapped him with her hoof, and muttered a phrase that, according to the later expert analysis of 3 scholars, 1 linguist and a retired taxidermist, translated loosely to, "You dropped your cigarette pack, sweet cheeks." The entire crowd blinked. Vernon turned red as a beet, tripped on the fence rail, fell face first into a pile of compost, and Jacob-Eli, prophet of the new world and angel child extraordinaire, laughed so hard both their heads nearly fell off. And the goat kept muttering her mysterious language, which might have meant something sacred. Or might have been the cosmic equivalent of roastin' him. Either way, the chapter ended with the villagers howling with laughter, tears streaming down their faces, grateful, truly grateful for a moment of dumb, shining, human humor in a world that had recently forgotten how funny it could be.